President Volodymyr Zelenskyy plans to join the G7 summit on Sunday. His attendance follows an appearance at the Arab League summit in Saudi Arabia. Joining us now from Kyiv, Ukraine, is James Landale from our partners at the BBC. So, James, what does President Zelenskyy hope to accomplish with these summit tours?
Well, the meeting that he joined today in Saudi Arabia, the meeting of the Arab League, it's very simple. President Zelenskyy wants to win his argument. There are many Arab countries that do not believe this war should be taking place. They believe that peace talks should take place immediately. They think that Ukraine should accept that some of its territory has been taken by Russia, because many of these Arab countries think that it would be better for the world economy for this conflict to end as soon as possible. President Zelenskyy takes a different view, and he's made it very clear that there is a battle here for sovereignty, for territorial integrity, and he made the case that that should matter as much to Arab leaders as it should to anybody else. His target in Japan, his participation in the meeting of G7 leaders, is different. There, it is simply to try to demonstrate continuing Western resolve, to send a very clear signal to Moscow that this alliance at the moment is holding firm, and that it's not fracturing, and that there's no point Moscow waiting for it to fracture. That, at least, is the message that he wants to send when he participates in it in coming days.
Well, today, G7 leaders announced new sanctions against Russia. Tell us about what more they're doing.
Well, Russia is already subject to unprecedented sanctions, historic sanctions that we have never seen in history. What we've seen today is a joint agreement by the G7 leaders to try and tighten those sanctions up. So they're going to crack down on evasion, countries that are getting around those sanctions by perhaps doing a little bit of trade under the counter with Russia's neighbors. They want to broaden those sanctions slightly to try and target other companies and individuals, maybe particularly those who are helping Russia with high-tech electronics, chips, things like that, material that could be used for part of Russia's war effort. For the UK's part, they've been targeting diamond trade, precious metals, things like that. The key thing, again, is the G7 leaders using these sanctions to once again demonstrate their collective resolve.
Well, President Biden is now saying the U.S. will help train Ukrainians on F-16 fighter jets. Why now, James, and how significant a change of course is this for Ukraine as it defends itself against Russia?
I think it is significant. I think that the White House has thus far been reluctant to allow F-16s to be given to Ukraine. They thought that it would be too expensive. They thought it could be escalatory. They didn't want some countries to give too much of their own military arsenals to Ukraine, potentially leaving themselves vulnerable to attack. But the European leaders have been lobbying Washington hard in recent days. The British Prime Minister, the Dutch Prime Minister, forming what they called an international coalition to support, at the very least, the training of Ukrainian pilots. What has been signalled by White House officials in Japan today is that the White House will support the training of Ukrainian pilots on F-16s, and the White House will also not stand in the way of other European countries giving some of those jets. Now, the White House said they didn't know when or how many jets would be passed, but that it was clearly signalled that the White House is not going to stand in the way of that. That won't help Ukraine with any counteroffensive. Any support for military warplanes will happen over a matter of months and years, not weeks. But again, it is a signal from the United States and the West to Moscow that they are in this for the long haul.
All right, James Landale, thank you.